I was picking up the last of the season's preserves from the St. Jacob's Farmers Market when my phone rang. It was my son. He wasn't speaking. He was breathing. That particular kind of breathing I hadn't heard since he was 7 years old and fell off the back fence and couldn't find the air to cry. I pulled over near the pickle stall and pressed the phone harder against my ear. "Marcus?" I kept my voice flat. "Steady. Where are you?" "Mom." Just that. One word. And then the sound changed and I knew he was sliding down a wall somewhere, sitting on a floor. "I'm coming." "Tell me where." He gave me the address of a Tim Hortons on the edge of Elmira, 22 minutes away. I left my basket of jars with the woman at the next booth. We'd gone to the same church for 15 years. She didn't ask questions, and I drove. He was in the far corner booth, his hands wrapped around a large double-double he hadn't touched. My son is 41 years old. He has his father's jaw and his grandfather's eyes, and when I slid into the seat across from him, he looked like neither. He looked like something had been taken out of him and not returned. "She's gone, Mom." He said it to the table. "She took Rosalind. They left this morning while I was at work." Her father's car was in the driveway when I got home. All of Rosalind's things were gone. Her crib, her bear, the little lamb nightlight we got at the market in Stratford, everything. Rosalind was 14 months old. I sat with that for a moment. I have learned in 63 years that some things need a moment before you speak. "Did she say anything? Leave a note?" There was an envelope on the kitchen table. He reached into his jacket and put it in front of me, and I noticed his hands were trembling. Not with grief. With something older and more dangerous than grief. I opened it. It was 2 pages. The first was a letter from her father's lawyer, a man named Douglas Whitmore of Whitmore & Associates in Guelph, informing Marcus that his wife Cecily had taken up primary residence with her parents and would be seeking sole custody of their daughter on the basis of what the letter called an unsafe domestic environment. The second page was a single handwritten line from Cecily. In her careful looping script, "My father said you were never right for us." I should have listened. I folded both pages and put them back in the envelope. I looked at my son. "Has she ever said that to you before? That her father disapproved?" He laughed. It was a short, ugly sound. "Every time we visited, Mom. Every time. He never once called me by my name. 4 years. Not once." He stopped. "He calls me the handyman, even to my face, sometimes, like it's a joke." My son is a licensed electrician. He owns his own small company, 3 trucks, 6 employees. He built the deck on the back of his house himself over 2 summers, and it's the finest deck I've ever stood on. He is not a handyman. But to Douglas Whitmore, whose family had been in Waterloo Region real estate for 3 generations and whose daughter had attended private school in Oakville, my son was simply a man who worked with his hands. That was the problem? I understood then. That had always been the problem. I want to tell you what happened clearly, because I need you to understand this wasn't a simple custody dispute or a marriage falling apart. What happened to my son was a plan. It had been constructed carefully over time by a man who believed that money was the same thing as authority and that authority made you untouchable. Cecily and Marcus had met 6 years earlier at a mutual friend's wedding in Cambridge. She was warm then, genuinely warm, not performed warmth. She laughed easily. She called me on Mother's Day without being reminded. When Rosalind was born, she sent me a photo from the hospital before Marcus even had his coat off, just a tiny blur of pink wrapped in flannel with the message, "She has his nose." Thank God, not his ears. We're perfect, Mom. I have that photo still. What I didn't know, what Marcus didn't know either, not fully, was that Cecily's warmth had always existed alongside a terror of her father. Not a fear of being hurt, a fear of being cut off. Douglas Whitmore controlled his daughter through money the way some people control through affection, and the distinction matters, because money doesn't ask you to feel anything in return. It just leaves or it stays. When Rosalind was about 6 months old, something shifted. Cecily started declining our Sunday dinners. She stopped answering my calls within the hour, then within the day. Marcus told me her father had been helping them financially, a down payment topped up, a car replaced, a private daycare subsidized. I told Marcus I thought that was something to pay attention to. He said I was being old-fashioned. He wasn't wrong that I'm old-fashioned. He was wrong that I'm old-fashioned. He was wrong about everything else. I called my daughter that evening, Patricia. I call her Pat. She hates it, which is why I do it. Is 4 years younger than Marcus and works in family law in Hamilton. She has her grandmother's gift for stillness and her grandfather's gift for strategy, and when I told her what had happened, she was quiet for so long that I thought the call had dropped. "Mom," she finally said, "is Marcus safe? Right now? Tonight? He's at my house. He's on the couch. He hasn't eaten." "Good. Keep him there. Don't let him go back to that house alone." She paused. "The letter, Whitmore and Associates. I know that firm. Douglas Whitmore has been using them for 15 years. They do a lot of high-asset family work. Mom, this was not an impulsive decision. This was staged. I know. The unsafe domestic environment language is a standard opening position in a pressure campaign. It doesn't mean they have evidence. It means they want Marcus to panic and make a mistake." Another pause. "I can't be his lawyer. That's a conflict. But I know someone, and I think we need to move before Monday." I heard something in her voice that I hadn't heard from her in years. A particular quality of attention. The way she sounded when she was 19 and working through a problem at the kitchen table, and she didn't want you to interrupt because she was almost there. "Pat," I said, "what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," she said slowly, "that Douglas Whitmore has been practicing this kind of thing for a very long time, and I'm thinking that people who practice something for a long time get careless. They think they know exactly how it's going to go." She stopped. "I'm also thinking that he doesn't know our family very well at all. The weekend passed the way those weekends do, the kind where you hold everything very carefully because you know the shape of it could change at any moment. Marcus ate a little. He slept badly. On Saturday morning, I found him sitting at my kitchen table at 5:30 with a cup of tea gone cold, looking at a photograph on his phone. I didn't ask what it was. I put fresh tea in front of him and sat down, and we watched the light change over the backyard together. His father, my late husband Ray, had built that backyard fence the summer Marcus was born, painted it himself, white in sections, Ray on one side and his brother on the other with the radio on. I have never once thought about taking it down. "She's not a bad person," Marcus said eventually. "I need you to know that. I know she's not. She's scared of him. She's always been scared of him. I just thought—" He stopped. "I thought love was enough to override it. That sounds stupid now. It doesn't sound stupid. It sounds like a person who wanted a family. I want my daughter back. I know. I put my hand over his. And we're going to get her back. Pat is working on it." He looked at me then, and I saw something in his face, steady slightly. I learned a long time ago that the most useful thing you can do for someone in crisis is not to tell them it'll be fine. It's to tell them that someone is already working on the problem. That changes the weight of things. What Pat found over that weekend with the help of her colleague, a family lawyer named Jeffrey Marsh, who had crossed paths with Whitmore and Associates twice in the last decade, was this. Douglas Whitmore had done this before. Not with Marcus. With another man, his older daughter's first husband, a teacher from Fergus named Kevin, a quiet man by all accounts, no family money, no connections. The wrong kind of background as far as Douglas was concerned. When that marriage had started to falter, Douglas had stepped in with lawyers and financial pressure and a manufactured narrative about instability, and Kevin had eventually signed away more than he should have because he was tired and alone and didn't understand what was being done to him. The marriage to the older daughter had ended anyway. Douglas had simply removed Kevin and absorbed the situation back into the family. Now he was trying to do the same thing to Marcus. Jeffrey found one other detail that mattered. The daycare Douglas had been subsidizing, the private one in Kitchener that Rosalind attended, was owned through a numbered corporation that Douglas had a controlling interest in. The subsidy he had offered Marcus and Cecily was, legally speaking, a loan with terms attached. terms that had never been clearly explained, terms that, if called in, would be financially ruinous. It was a leash. An elegant one, but a leash. Cecily's father requested a meeting the following Tuesday, not through lawyers. A phone call to Marcus, friendly-voiced, suggesting they get together at the Waterloo Golf and Country Club to talk things through man-to-man. Marcus told me about it that night, and I watched his jaw tighten when he said it. "Don't go," I said. "Mom, you don't owe that man a private conversation on his chosen ground, in his chosen setting, without counsel present. That is not a negotiation. That's a performance for an audience of one." Marcus was quiet. "He wants to make you an offer," I said. "He wants to see how desperate you are. He wants to measure the gap between what you need and what you're willing to accept, because that gap is where he operates." I looked at my son. "Don't show him the gap." He didn't go. Instead, Jeffrey Marsh sent a letter that Friday. It outlined, in very measured legal language, that Marcus was aware of the terms attached to the daycare subsidy and that he would be seeking full disclosure of all financial arrangements between Douglas Whitmore's companies and the marriage as part of the custody proceedings. It also noted that Marcus intended to pursue a schedule of substantial parenting time with Rosalind, beginning immediately, and that any interference with that access would be documented. Jeffrey told us later that Douglas Whitmore had called Whitmore & Associates within 2 hours of receiving that letter. I saw Cecily for the first time in 6 weeks at the initial mediation session in Cambridge. She came in with her father's lawyer beside her and her own hands folded in her lap, and she didn't look at Marcus when she sat down. I wasn't supposed to be there. I sat in the hallway outside on a hard chair with a book I didn't read. But I saw her face when she came out for the break. She was alone for 30 seconds, just her and the water cooler at the end of the hall, before her father's lawyer reappeared. And in those 30 seconds before she heard footsteps and went still again, she looked like a woman who was very, very tired. She glanced up and saw me. I didn't say anything. I didn't move. I just looked at her the way I used to look at her when she was nursing Rosalind at 2 in the morning, and I'd bring her tea, and she'd say I didn't know it would be this hard, and I'd say neither did I, the first time. Her eyes went shiny. She looked away. 3 weeks later, she called me. It was a Wednesday evening, and I was making soup, leek and potato, the recipe from Ray's mother, the one I've made so many times I don't need the card anymore. My phone was on the counter, and when her name came up, I turned the burner down and answered. "I need to talk to someone who isn't involved," she said. Her voice was careful the way voices are when someone has been choosing their words very precisely for a very long time. "All right," I said. There was a long pause. "He moved the money," she said, "after Jeffrey's letter went out. He moved the daycare subsidy into a different structure. My name is on it now, just mine. He said it was to protect me." She stopped. "He's done this before, hasn't he? He's done this before, hasn't he? He's done this before." I thought about what to say. I thought about Kevin, the teacher from Fergus, who Pat had tracked down through public records and who had, according to those records, spent the better part of 2 years in a legal process that had drained him down to nothing. "I think," I said carefully, "that you should talk to a lawyer who is yours alone, not one your father recommended, not one your father has ever been in the same room with." She was quiet. "I think you already know that," I said. Another pause. "Is Marcus?" She stopped. "Is he angry at me? He misses his daughter. I miss him." It came out very quietly, almost surprised, like she'd said it before she meant to. "I didn't want this. I want you to know that. He told me Marcus had been hiding financial problems, that he'd looked into it, that I needed to protect Rosalind and myself. I believed him. I had always believed him." She stopped again, and then Jeffrey's letter came, and I started reading, and I realized I don't actually know what the truth is about any of it. I just know what my father told me. "Cecily." I turned the burner completely off. "Where is Rosalind right now?" "Asleep." "Upstairs." She said Mama for the first time yesterday. Her voice cracked slightly on that. "I wanted to call Marcus." "You should call him." I'm afraid of what happens if I do. My father, your father, I said, is not the person who has to raise that little girl. You are, and Marcus is, and I would very much like to be her grandmother for many years if you'll let me. I stopped. Whatever you decide about the marriage, that is yours and Marcus's to figure out, not mine, but Rosalind needs her father. You know that. A long silence. Tell Marcus, she said finally, that he can call me. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I. She stopped. Just tell him he can call. What happened after that did not happen quickly. I want to be honest about that because this is a true accounting, and the truth is that nothing about this resolved in a clean, satisfying rush. Courts don't move like that. People don't move like that. But here is what did happen. Cecily retained her own lawyer, a woman in Hamilton, no connection to her father's firm, and amended her position in the custody proceeding. She and Marcus agreed to a shared parenting arrangement, 50-50, with Rosalind staying in the Elmira area, so neither home required a significant move. They are not back together. I don't know if they will be. But Marcus had Rosalind for a full weekend in November, and on Saturday afternoon, he brought her to my house and she crawled across my kitchen floor toward the dog's water bowl with absolute focused determination. And I sat on the tile and watched her, and I couldn't have said a word if you'd asked me to. Jeffrey Marsh filed a formal complaint with the Law Society of Ontario regarding the conduct of Whitmore and Associates in relation to the reclassification of the daycare subsidy structure. I don't know where that stands. These things take time. Douglas Whitmore called Marcus once in October. Marcus didn't answer. He texted me about it afterward. Just 3 words, he called. Declined. I sent him back a single word. Good. Pat came for Thanksgiving. She brought wine and her boyfriend and a look on her face that I recognized from when she was 11 and had solved something she'd been working on for weeks. We ate outside because October in Ontario was warm enough, just barely. And after dinner, she and I sat on the back step with our mugs, and she said, "He overreached. Men like that always do eventually. They mistake patience for weakness." I thought about Cecily sitting across from me at that mediation hallway, the 30 seconds when she was alone and her face showed everything. "She got herself out," I said. "That matters." Pat nodded. "It does." The fence Ray built was lit up orange in the last of the evening light, and somewhere down the street a neighbor's kid was kicking something, a ball, a can, against a curb. That irregular rhythmic sound that means absolutely nothing except that the ordinary world is continuing to exist. I held Rosalind on the back step that Saturday evening until she fell asleep on my shoulder, and I thought about what my own grandmother used to say, a woman who had raised 4 children in a 3-room house in Cape Breton and who had a gift for reducing things to their actual size. She used to say that people who build their power by diminishing others have to keep diminishing forever because the power has no source of its own. It needs feeding. It needs new people to make small. Douglas Whitmore had been feeding that thing for decades. He had made Kevin small. He had made his daughter afraid. He had looked at my son and seen nothing but a gap he could exploit. He miscalculated. He didn't know that my son had a sister who had spent 12 years learning exactly the language people like Douglas Whitmore used and learning the laws that constrained them. He didn't know that Marcus had been raised by a man who built things to last and a woman who, when she needs to be, can be very patient indeed. He didn't know that Cecily, given a single moment of space and the sight of someone who wasn't afraid of him, would choose her daughter over her inheritance. He thought we were the kind of people who could be waited out, who would get tired, who didn't have the resources to keep going. He was wrong about all of it. My granddaughter is asleep upstairs right now as I write this. She has my son's jaw and Cecily's eyes and the particular boldness of someone who has not yet been taught to make herself smaller for anyone. I intend to help keep it that way. Some legacies are worth protecting. Some aren't. The work of a life is knowing the difference and acting accordingly, not with anger, not with revenge for its own sake, but with the kind of steady, grounded love that doesn't negotiate with people who are trying to take what isn't theirs. That is what my family knows how to do. That is what we did. I've been thinking a lot lately about what Douglas Whitmore actually believed when he set all of this in motion. I think he believed that people without money, without connections, without the right surname on the right kind of letterhead, he believed those people had a shorter reach, that when you applied enough pressure in the right places, they would simply fold, sign the papers, go quiet, disappear back into whatever ordinary life they came from, and stop complicating things. He wasn't unusual in thinking that. I've met versions of that belief my whole life. What he couldn't calculate, what that kind of thinking never accounts for, is that families like mine don't measure their resources the same way. We didn't have a Guelph law firm on retainer. We didn't have a real estate holdings or a country club membership or a daughter who had been raised to see financial dependency as safety. What we had was something slower and less visible. We had paid attention to each other for decades. We had shown up. We had sat on kitchen floors at 5:30 in the morning and watched the light change and not required anything of each other in that moment except presence. That is not nothing. That turns out to be quite a lot. I think about my son, Marcus, sitting across from me at that Tim Hortons table with his hands around a cold cup of coffee, looking like something had been hollowed out of him. And I think about who he was 6 months later. Not healed, not finished grieving, but upright, calling his daughter on FaceTime every second evening, building a new routine, learning, slowly, that he could trust his own judgment again after months of having it undermined by a man who had a financial interest in making him doubt it. That recovery didn't happen because things magically resolved. It happened because Marcus made one choice correctly every single day when it would have been easier to make the wrong one. He didn't go to that golf club meeting. He didn't respond to the provocation. He didn't let his anger at Douglas harden into something that would have cost him in the proceedings. Every one of those small, correct choices accumulated into something that held Aunt Patricia. I watched my daughter do something I hadn't seen since she was a teenager working through a problem at the kitchen table. She got very still and very focused, and she used everything she knew, not for revenge, for accuracy. There's a difference, and it matters enormously. Revenge is about making the other person feel something. What Pat was after was simply the truth of the situation, documented and presented correctly so that a fair outcome had a fighting chance. Cecily made the hardest choice of all, and I don't say that lightly. She chose to look clearly at something she had been not looking at for most of her adult life. That takes a particular kind of courage that doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly in a 30-second moment alone by a water cooler or in a Wednesday evening phone call when you finally say out loud the thing you've been thinking for months. I have enormous respect for that. I hope she knows it. What I want to say, to anyone sitting with something that feels too large and too rigged and too exhausting to keep fighting, is that the people who build power through diminishment are counting on exactly that feeling. They are counting on your exhaustion. They are betting that the gap between what you need and what you have the energy to pursue will widen enough for them to walk through it. Don't let them count correctly. Not out of stubbornness, not out of pride, but because the thing's worth protecting. A child who says "mama" for the first time, a fence your late husband painted white in sections one summer long ago, the particular trust of a son who looks at you and steadies. Those things are worth the cost of staying upright one more day. That is what I know. That is what this year taught me, or rather confirmed in me at 63. Rosalind is asleep upstairs. She hasn't been taught yet to make herself small for anyone. I intend to help keep it that way.